Hello and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast. Today, my guest is Sylvia Salcedo, who's an acupuncturist, a certified health coach. She has over 20 years in integrative wellness, and she is a microdose coach and psychedelic facilitator. In this episode, we talk about MDMA. We talk about the importance of setting, intention, integration, how to do it in a safe setting with somebody that you trust, how to source it appropriately. We talk about dosing. We talk about how to minimize side effects, how much is too much, and we really just break open everything surrounding this topic. This is Sylvia's wheelhouse. This is her area of expertise, and she really deep dives into this topic. I hope that you'll enjoy this episode. And if you do, be sure to check out last week's episode with Sylvia, where we talk about psilocybin and microdosing and deep dive into those topics. I hope you will enjoy today's episode. And please, if you are, take a moment to give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. It really means so much. And we really want to spread the word of the channel. So we really appreciate your input. And I hope you'll enjoy today's episode. Hello, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast, a place to explore possibility through mindfulness, movement, and self-discovery. Our intention is to deliver insight and inspiration while fostering conversations that are genuine, unfiltered, and deeply human. We hope you will enjoy today's episode. Hi, Sylvia. Good morning, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited to have you back again. So last time we spoke about psilocybin and microdosing, and today we're going to discuss MDMA. So I'm very, very excited about this topic. So what is MDMA for people that are completely unaware of what it is?
Okay, so MDMA is a molecule, and it's a long name molecule. It's 3,4-methyl oxymethamphetamine. I could have totally demolished that name, but it is like that. So it's a substance that was created. It was first invented in 1912 over in Europe. And while they were looking for blood thinners, they came upon MDMA and they kind of shelved it. Then the military took a look at it in the 20s, looked at it a little bit for psychological warfare, and then shelved it again. But it was in the 70s when Dr. Shulgin, who was out on the West Coast, he rediscovered MDMA, and he really realized the potential that it had in therapy. So he began to kind of use it with his therapist in the 70s out around California in the Berkeley area. Then what happened was in the 80s, it began to kind of be pushed out and hit more of the recreational land. And that's where the DEA came in. And we're like, no, we're going to shut this down. And they created it as a substance one. So it became really hard to use MDMA. It really went into the hidden corners of society. But what was interesting was that during the 90s, it actually was living, but it was living in the rave world. So in the rave world, it was called Ecstasy and Molly. And they called it Ecstasy to kind of take it away from what the DEA had pushed down and said there wasn't a lot of use. So they're like, oh, let's call it Ecstasy. But Ecstasy was also a little bit tampered with. It wasn't just a pure MDMA. It was Ecstasy oftentimes has some added components to it, whereas Molly was more known as the pure molecule. But anyway, so it had this underground life in the rave world where people are taking it and dancing. And then it was in 2020 where the MAPS organization and Rick Doblin really started to want to bring this molecule back up into the forefront because they knew the potential. They had seen what it offered. And so they wanted to bring it up to the forefront again. So he started MAPS and has been pushing since 2020 to get it rescheduled again. And they started with a focus on veterans and how important this molecule can really help with the veteran population and PTSD. And so now that's where we're at. We're on the verge of getting it shifted, but still having to wait on that.
Yeah. I thought there were some setbacks with MAPS recently.
Yeah, there was, it was in phase 3 and they were about to get it cleared and shifted. But what happened was that there were some structures in the scientific research that wasn't actually aligning to what they wanted. And one of them was like, you needed to have a double blind study. And
Mm.
MDMA is really hard to do a double blind study because, like, you're
Yeah.
like, I know I'm on it. So
All
that was
right.
one thing. And
Yeah.
there was also some worry about some inappropriate therapeutic settings that had happened too. So they really kind of put that. They were worried about its addiction capacity as well. So those are kind of the three things that have held it back. And they want the researchers to go back and continue to try to find ways to tighten their scientific research so that it can come
Yeah.
back and be
Yeah.
shifted from a Schedule 1.
And to clarify, MDMA is something that has been created in a lab. It's synthetic. It's not from nature. It's not natural.
Yep. So it's not natural. It's a substance. And in that substance, it has amphetamines, which are kind of energy, and there can also be empathic, and also has psychedelic components like mescaline. So it has these two different components within it. What it does biologically in the body, which is what makes it feel so good, it releases serotonin.
Hmm.
The serotonin is the feel good drug. It helps us, have a little bit more empathy for ourselves. It's to feel good. It also releases dopamine. So dopamine helps us have better connections with people around us. And then the norepinephrine. And that's where we get that alertness and that clarity. So unlike, let's say, psilocybin, when you're going in and you've got a lot going on in your journeys, MDMA, you can have a lot of alertness and clarity. But it's a really powerful substance that helps you feel good, kind of
Yes.
tap into old triggers that you might have in a softer way, or helps you kind of, and that's why they were looking at the PTSD, because you can explore the PTSD, but in a place that's softened with
Yeah.
the walls come down and a more just gentler perspective.
Yeah. So let's talk about the danger and overuse of MDMA, because it's like if you have too much weed, you might kind of pass out on the couch or whatever, kill some brain cells, I don't know. And then like psilocybin, if you overuse it, there's not really long-term consequences, but there is with MDMA overuse, right? With the serotonin. So what are some of the dangers around that?
Yeah, so I guess putting it more into like a protocol would be helpful for people to understand. Since we're
Hmm.
coming from a therapeutic perspective, when we're using MDMA, we want to kind of upload it in the front where we're using it maybe once a month or once every couple months to really allow those shifts that we're seeking to sink in. And then we taper off, and maybe there's a time period where you're not using it again. I heard this podcast just the other day on Radio Lab that was talking about we have 20 to 30 good uses of your MDMA. So really kind of take that into account. Save a couple for when, you're 70 and 80. Understand that there's this life kind of line of using this MDMA. And so use it with intention. Use
Hmm.
it with that purpose of creating these big shifts, then give it that break. And then
Hmm.
shift back into it, if you're going to up level to another area.
Hmm.
So
What does that mean though? The 20 to 30 good uses?
like basically they were saying like after 20 to 30 uses, you're not going to experience the benefits of MDMA.
Hmm.
And it was interesting that they said that, but part of me is wondering like maybe if that was like a raver, right? So a raver who was
Right.
using it every weekend, a year or 2 years straight,
Yeah.
that they realized that after 20, 30 uses, they're not going to get that same kind of experience as you would beforehand. But that could be maybe a time period where you need to take a break from it.
Yeah.
But in the therapeutic settings, we're using it once a month, let's say for 3 to 6 months. Then you're taking a break. And then
Yeah.
maybe you'll tap back into it again.
So let's talk about the dangers about doing it too often, because it is tempting. It is one of those ones that feels really good that people might want to take more often, but there are some big dangers associated with that.
I mean, I think one of the biggest uncomfortable essence of MDMA is that it can really, so when you release so much serotonin in your body, after that, you can have a really big letdown. So you're not going to feel so good maybe 48 hours afterwards. So if you're
Hmm.
coming from a deficient body, let's say, and we're looking at the system from a Chinese medical perspective, and we're coming in with deficiency. So oftentimes women who are showing up in their 40s or 50s, they've been busy raising their children, they've been busy with building businesses. Like there's a lot that we're pumping out. And
Hmm.
so if we put this on top, we're going to get that, can tap into that deficient essence of who we are. So the more that you're tapping into that, the more that likelihood that you're going to feel just pretty worn out from it. So really understanding, like, when you do MDMA, what's your downtime afterwards? That's going to give you a really good highlight of your overall health and well-being. So if you can do the MDMA and maybe you get a little bit tired, but you bounce back and in the next few days you're good to go, then you know your system can still handle this molecule in the body, and it could be helpful for you. But if you're realizing that you're doing it too frequently and you're falling into these adrenal fatigue crashes where you can't get out of bed for a couple days, like, that's an awareness that you're taking a look at what's that underlying vitality that I have.
Yeah.
So you use that as a balance to understand how you're actually doing. So you don't want to be totally worn out with it. There might be a period where, after you do a journey, 24 hours later, you might understand that your body needs some rest. But if you're just like out and out, then there may be some underlying deficiency in the system that we want to build up and get you ready for that next journey.
Yeah. I had heard after taking MDMA, it's a good idea to take 100 milligrams twice a day of 5-HTP and then maybe ashwagandha for a week afterwards to help with the serotonin levels. Have you heard that?
Absolutely. So we'll do magnesium on the day of the journey, and the magnesium is going to help with jaw clenching. We'll also do L-carnitine on the day of the journey as well, and that supports the brain health. And then serotonin for 5 days afterwards. I love using the mushrooms, or ashwagandha, reishi, ginseng. Like, there's a lot of really good herbs out there that we can use to help support our system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people actually even have like these kits. Like, you have a pre-MDMA kit.
Yeah. Pre and post.
Pre and post, yep.
And what about, so MDMA, for the record, is illegal, correct?
It's illegal, yes.
And so if somebody's sourcing it, where are they going to be able to find this? What are the dangers? How do they know if they're getting something off the street? Especially when we're talking about ecstasy, which tends to be cut with all kinds of things like speed and things like that. How do people know if they're getting a therapeutic grade of something?
Yes. So first thing to tap into is a practitioner who's an MDMA practitioner. Somebody that has been certified or has studied MDMA, because they're going to have the connection to a medical grade MDMA. So if you're looking to do a therapeutic journey, I would recommend, finding a therapist who's working with MDMA, because they're going to have that connection. It is pretty sketchy to be buying MDMA off the street right now. Fentanyl is the big thing that's happening with MDMA. And fentanyl is $1 billion business that's coming in through Mexico that's just really pumping it into a lot of our different street drugs, right? So if you're buying ecstasy, the chances are that it could have fentanyl. But now they're making a lot of drug test kits. So you can find online an MDMA drug test kit, and you can test your substance. If you're not getting it from a therapist or a trusted person that testing is a great way to make sure that you're safe. MDMA is one of the ones that I would be really afraid to buy off the street. And if I have to, I would definitely be testing it. But again, coming from a therapeutic level, working with a practitioner who is doing MDMA, you're going to have a better chance of getting a really high medical grade MDMA. But even if it's a new person, you could still test it.
Yeah.
And how safe that is for you. It's definitely important.
And for somebody that's distributing the MDMA, the amount varies is it by body weight?
It's by a therapeutic amount. So we usually do between 75 and 125 milligrams for for a session. And then we'll do a booster session after that as well.
And how big is the booster?
The booster can be between 40 and 60.
And how soon after the first dose?
It's about 90 minutes to 2 hours. So kind of depending, like, you feel into how people are feeling, how much do they experience, what's going on, and then you can see if they're ready for another booster after that.
Okay. And so say you and I are going to do a journey together. You give me the correct dose of MDMA. What am I going to experience with you? And how do I know when that's wearing off, when we need the booster? What is that experience from beginning to end going to look like?
Okay. So I do sessions in person, in retreats, and online. And the entire process starts with a intake form, a pretty thorough intake form, understanding what medications you're on, because there are medications that you cannot be on SSRIs and do MDMA because they're both going to be fighting for the serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
So really understanding what type of medications you're on. And then we're going to dive into understanding what's your experience with psychedelics. What are you coming for? What are you seeking? What is it that you want to heal, or where is it that you want to go? So we really start off with a thorough intake form. From there, we'll jump on a call and we'll create a heart connection.
Mm-hmm.
You'll create a space where you feel safe with me and this is a good fit. Me being able to begin to hold and vision what you've got in mind. As a seer, I really like to create that space and understand where we're going with this. So if it's an online journey, then I will be sending to their home the supplements, and they'll have a protocol that you have to follow before we do the journey. And that looks like a certain amount of time you're not eating, what you can have beforehand, drink wise, and things like that.
What is that protocol?
So it's a 3 hour without substance protocol.
Even water?
A little bit of water, but if you're drinking coffee, you really minimize coffee or not have coffee, because
Mm-hmm.
they're both going to be amping you up. So you don't need the
Okay.
double amp with the coffee. And then let's say the session starts, it's going to be a 5 hour session. So you'll have your first dose and you'll take it with magnesium. And
How
when
much magnesium?
about 50 to 100.
Mm-hmm. I haven't heard that about the magnesium.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What's the reason for that?
For the clenched jaws.
Oh, that's right. Okay. How does magnesium help with that?
It's a supplement that can help calm the muscles, calm the tensity of the system, and so it will soften any clenching of the jaws.
Yeah. Interesting. Because that is a common side effect, is the jaw tightness.
Yep. So magnesium is
Mm-hmm.
really good. You can take it
Okay.
right when you take your first dose, and then you can also take it in the middle of your journey as well.
How, so another 100 or another 50 in the middle?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Because does it have a pretty immediate effect, magnesium?
It does.
Okay. All right. I take magnesium every night, but I've never heard of taking it for MDMA.
Yeah, you can totally
Yeah.
take your MDMA.
Okay.
So let's say the journey's starting. You've taken your supplement. The first hour or so, I kind of think of it as landing an airplane. So you're shifting you're moving into more of the MDMA altered state. But during that shift, it could feel a little uncomfortable. Things can start to move within you. You might have a lot of thinking processes come up, or your body just starts to feel a little uncomfortable. But then after you land the airplane, you move into this really juicy place. And that juicy place will last, between 4 and 5 hours from there.
Mm-hmm.
You're landing into this place where your walls begin to come down, your heart begins to open up, and we really can kind of dive in and see what we're doing here. What's so powerful about MDMA is different things that we can do with it. Part of it is going back to the past and rewriting a story that's been really intense for us, softening the edges around that story. It's like, so we come in with trauma, we shake it up with like a snow globe, and then it finds a newer place to rest in our mind and our heart.
Mm-hmm.
I really work with MDMA as personal growth and development. What I like to work with it is like finding our strength and our powers, really having that place to dive into self-love and build our confidence and understanding who we are. So it's this, session after session, working with these women that are embodying their higher selves, embodying their strengths and who are they becoming. And it's just such a powerful experience to see a woman really tap into that essence and her being. And the MDMA offers so much clarity in that space where it's just like, there it is. And they just become and they embody it. So it's a really beautiful work. It works with the amygdala to kind of reduce fear from
Mm-hmm.
our being. So we could come in with a fear that's just been there for a long time, and quickly it can allow it to shift and shake out of our system. And when that begins to shift and shake out of our system, we get to build a new way of thinking into that place.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot
Yeah.
of this work has to do with the creation methodology, which is understanding where we're coming from, what are the data points of who we are and what's created us to this point,
Mm-hmm.
and then using this experience as a shifting place to who we're becoming and what we want to put inside of those places.
Yeah.
A lot of really, really beautiful work.
I mean, it sounds like you're creating a new neural pathway. And then my question would be, how do you integrate that experience after the journey? Because I feel like that's always where the work is after the journey, where you're not going back to your old patterning, which is so comfortable and so
Yeah.
easy to do. How do we hold on to that experience and create a new pathway?
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're actually working with understanding our patterns. Well, first of all, let me back up for a second. After our session, we've got about 2 weeks of this critical thinking process, 2 weeks where we have this capacity to really change these neuroplasticity ways in our mind. But then what happens is we use processing. So we become very clear with what our patterns are, and we allow ourselves to help shift and change those patterns. So
Mm-hmm.
we're like, oh, we're coming from this is where we're at, and this is what we've been doing. We become really clear, and we practice processing the shift.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're stuck in a pattern, we're stuck in a place that's bringing up um, maybe negative thoughts about ourselves, self-criticism. We're in just these low vibrational thinking patterns. So we're understanding like, oh, there's that old pattern, right? There it is.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we use those next 2 weeks to actually shift and change those patterns. So it's the master class. So the experience is what highlights it for us,
Yeah.
allows us to think new things. And then we drop into the master class for the 2 weeks later to create the shift and change. So it
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of work in that time period to be like, okay, those are the old thinking patterns, and this is what I want to feel. But after an experience such as MDMA, you are able to really reach these highs, these experiences of yourself that are new. I think that MDMA allows us to really tap into our highest self. It allows us actually a moment to feel our highest self. So when you're in that experience, you're like, oh, there's my power and there's my strength. So you take that, it comes with you afterwards. Those old patterns might come up, but you still have that energy of your higher self or that energy of the person that you're becoming. So you can tackle those old patterns and be like, oh, there's that old pattern. All right, I'm going to work on shifting it. I'm going to work
Yeah.
on changing it. So yeah, a lot of work done in those 2 weeks after that.
Yeah.
And then when I'm working with someone, I also recommend like we're tapping in, monthly for the first 3 to 6 months with something like this, because we really want to ingrain those patterns inside of our system. We're
Yeah.
creating this new foundation of who we are. So we get this high, we understand where we're going, we're off the medicine. Now we're in that critical thinking period where we're making those changes. And then
Yeah.
a month later or 2 months later, we're like dropping back in so we can really solidify those shifts that we're making.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done MDMA in a therapeutic setting, and what I found for me was that the walls around that I built around my body, around my heart, all of those crumbled. The inner critic, which can be really loud, just completely disappeared. It went away. Any like anxiety or fear or any of those emotions kind of melted away. And it's amazing, like being in a space of empowerment without any criticism, any of that negative critic coming in and bothering us.
Absolutely. Isn't that amazing? It's so amazing how it like cuts down the critic, the self-critic.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You know what else I found a lot of beautiful work with it is with couples,
Mm.
right?
Yes. Oh,
Let's say
yeah. I
that
could
you've
totally
got
see
a
that.
couple that's
Yeah.
dealing with stuff.
Hmm.
When you're not on the MDMA, there's going to be old patterns and it's just like kind of tight and stuck, and you're just stuck in those ways of
Hmm.
communicating to each other. You put something like MDMA into the mix, and all of a sudden, the self criticism goes away, the defensiveness goes
Hmm.
away, the capacity to see your partner in a new way opens up. So you're able to kind of talk about the sticky points, but you're met with compassion and you're
Yeah.
met with understanding versus like that old pattern of like, oh, you're just annoying me, right? Like it just
Yeah.
opens up the experience so that you can really share what's on your heart, and it allows couples to just strengthen their relationship.
Yeah,
It's
I could
so
totally see
powerful.
that. Yeah,
So
yeah.
powerful.
Because it's the same thing when we do our own work, is that um, the heart opens and our self-compassion opens and our ability to see ourselves opens. And then the judgments and the criticisms and the old stories and the old, like all of that stuff just kind of melts away. It is kind of fascinating how that happens.
It's brilliant. It's
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of my favorite psychedelics to work with.
Yeah.
I really enjoy personally my own work that I've done with it and how it's helped me. I really enjoy the experience on the medicine.
Yes.
And then I've enjoyed so much how empowered and the
Yeah.
incredible shifts and transformations that people have on this medicine.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting when I hear you talk about it as a psychedelic, because from my experience, I have not had a psychedelic experience on MDMA.
Right. So you're not seeing hallucinations and
Yes.
stuff like that. Totally.
Yeah.
I
I
feel
think
like
people think psychedelic and they think you're going to see flowers growing on the wall and
it's not at all, right? It's like you and I sitting there, we're just like, ooh, we're softened and we're sitting in the couch and we're just really in connection and communicating about life and what's going on and things that we're excited about shifting and things that we're excited about moving into. Like it's just such a powerful, powerful thing.
yeah. And I could see how it'd be really powerful for like something with major PTSD, because it allows you to step outside of your experience and to witness it from a different angle without being like entangled in the middle of the experience.
Yeah, it just really softens up, working with that amygdala, it's just going to soften up that fear
Yeah.
response and allow you to see that experience in a new way and reprogram, like put it on the shelf in your brain in a new way
Yeah.
versus being on the forefront and so scary and so intense. It's going to soften up that experience and then shelve it somewhere else in a much gentler way.
Yeah. I mean, I can see why it is a controlled substance, because I think that there has to be so much care that is um, needs to be taken in consideration with MDMA. And I think being in a therapeutic environment and not overdoing it and taking the right amount. And people want that. They want that feeling. They want that connection. They want that feeling of community um, and joy and open heartedness. So I could see how there would be a tendency towards addiction, and how it is so much better in a therapeutic space.
Yeah, it really is. In the ways that you can use it very powerfully for transformation, right?
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
I've actually done a couple MDMA journeys by myself, but it's so much more powerful when someone sees me, when I'm in that space of
Mhm.
belonging and connection. Even by myself, I can kind of just like, oh, yeah, I feel good, but not as much work gets done when I'm in a community or being seen that someone has the reflection or can hold space for what I have going on. So I think that's one of the important things that the MDMA in a therapeutic setting can do. The other
Yeah.
one is, getting the right substance, getting a substance that's really clean for you and being able to understand, put it in a container. I'm like, this is actually what we're doing. But I
Yeah.
remember I was in a group journey the day that the FDA was like, no, we're not going to allow this to come through. And I just have had the most amazing group ceremony.
Mhm.
All of these women having these incredible breakthroughs and understanding of themselves. And then I come home and I hear the news, and it's so opposite of what's happening. Like this is in this right setting, it is one of the most powerful tools that we have to create transformation and healing in our body. Pretty quickly too. Like you can be on MDMA and how quickly an old thinking pattern can shift in your mind. You can just
Yeah.
really drop into a new way of thinking or a new way of being that's in alignment to who you're becoming.
Yeah. So is it that everyone going in the MDMA journey in a therapeutic way sets a really clear intention and they know what they're wanting to work on, and then they go into that experience through the journey?
Yes. Yep, that's how we normally do it. Some people, their intentions are just going to be like, I want to allow whatever comes up to come up.
Yeah.
There is that experience as well too. But oftentimes people, when we're working with them, there's something specific that we're holding space for them. And so in that journey space, what I do is I kind of bring them back to that. right?
Yeah.
So it's like, instead of allowing it to just flow wherever it wants to flow, I'll kind of create that container, and we'll be in conversation, and then I'll allow them to come back to that. So as a facilitator, we're always holding space for what that intention of that a personal experience is, and
Yeah.
bring it back for them.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
I,
think with any psychedelic, right, the most important things are the setting, the intention, the integration. All of those are key in order for someone to have a successful journey with any psychedelic.
yep, absolutely. Having
Yeah.
that space. And that's what's been really nice in working here and in this space, is just understanding that and really learning how to master what that is and how to hold space for people. And I love
Yeah.
it. I love it so much.
What are some myths that you've encountered around MDMA?
Myths that I've encountered. That's a good question. There could be a little bit of fear around it, like I've had clients kind of show up, like they just don't know, they don't know what it's going to experience. So there's a little bit of fear it being a psychedelic,
Mhm.
and they're thinking they're going to have some hallucination. And then once they're on it, they're like, oh my God, totally different
Yes.
experience than what I thought that was going to be.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did have one journey one time where it was almost like more of an ayahuasca journey. A
Hmm.
lot was coming up to the surface for this client. But in general, it's a very, very heart opening experience. So, from my teacher, the way that he teaches it is that one of the first places that we want to go is drop into our heart, because our heart allows us to feel safe.
Mhm.
Once we feel safe, we can kind of dig in a little deeper, or we build our imagination. And when we build our imagination, it's really about having our imagination be wider so we can experience different thinking processes. So right now we're at a place where, like, okay, this is what my thinking is, and my thinking is due to my past and to where I've been.
Mhm.
But when we can drop into our heart and create this self-compassion, the sense of self-love, and the sense of safety, we rewrite these old patternings, and it gives us space to imagine. So then we're in the place of imagination, which is like, oh, wow, maybe I could do that, or maybe I could do that. So we
Mhm.
live in this place where our imagination strengthens and becomes more broad, and we can call in things that we never thought we would be able to call in. So
Yeah.
work is a lot about really strengthening our imagination so we
Yeah.
can live in this experience from a place of hope and inspiration versus scarcity or fear or something that's holding us back.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm thinking of like other psychedelics, ayahuasca, um, and psilocybin, things like that. The journeys can be really intense, can potentially be dark, can be really heavy. But from what I'm hearing with you, the MDMA typically has this light element to it.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, why I really enjoy working with it. You're going to get a little bit more of a similar experience each time. Whereas
Yeah.
some of these other psychedelics, like everyone's on their own journey, and it's going to show up for everybody differently. But with MDMA, we're going to kind of reach that same spot. Um, with MDMA too, like, and particularly the line that I use, you have the capacity to shift, to go in a little gentler. So understanding who's showing up and to do the work, you really get to understand who they are and then personalize it for them. So maybe someone just wants to go in a little bit because they're still afraid. Or they have a lot of trauma. So you can go in just a little bit and allow them to experience that. And then
Hmm.
once they begin to understand, like, oh, it's safe here, then you can do a little bit of deeper work. And so that's what's also
Yeah.
beautiful. We're going to be able to kind of land in different areas, different dosages for people as well.
Yeah. Do you always give a booster, and why do we give a booster?
I don't always give a booster, but we do give a booster because the high peak experience is going to be, let's say, 90 minutes to 120 minutes. So then when you give that booster, it allows that experience to go longer, and you can go a little bit deeper in. So you're kind of like opening up the stage with the first dose,
Hmm.
understanding how it affects them. What are they experiencing? And then with that second dose, you allow them to go even deeper. You
Okay.
allow them to explore
Yeah.
even deeper, but it's really personalized. Like maybe one dose is just more than enough that someone needs, and they're like, I'm good, and they're uncovering a lot of things, and they're doing well. But these
Hmm.
different dosages, actually, when we do retreats, and we do actually 3 different dosages.
Okay. How do you time
So it's every
those?
couple hours, so
Yeah.
you'll do the first dose, and then a couple hours you'll do a second dose, and then you have an option to do a
Hmm.
third dose from there.
And are people able to sleep after an experience?
So that's a really good question. I am all about sleep. So I prefer to start the journeys earlier in the day. I'm
Hmm.
not a night owl. I like, if I'm doing all this incredible work, I actually want to be supported with my sleep.
Yeah.
So my journeys, I usually start during the morning time. Anytime I'm doing it in person or online, we're
Yeah.
going to be starting at like 10 in the morning. A, because I'm a mother and I need to be done by the end of the day when my children are coming home from school. And then that also gives that person that few hours to really calm down their system and be able to have a good night's sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Because does have this element of insomnia if you take it at night.
Yeah, exactly. And then it just, for me, it just wears my system down. So I'm
Hmm.
doing all this work mentally, but then my system's getting crashed physically. So I've learned for myself, I love to, have start early in the morning and allow the whole day to have that
Yeah.
experience, and then that afterglow in the evening time, and then be able to put myself to bed. And I might need
Yeah.
some melatonin that night or something like that.
Yeah.
You were telling me that you have done it in like a group of people come together?
Yeah. We've done MDMA with a group of people and done healing sessions with each other. And it's been really powerful and really therapeutic, and really empowering.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
empowering, isn't it?
Well, and I think what it's allowed us to do is we're all working on each other, we're all healing each other, and we're all tapping into our gifts and our talents. And all of our gifts and our talents are completely different.
Yeah.
And so it's been an avenue to figure out what those talents and gifts are, and then to use them in that session and see how they play out. Um, and so it's just a small group of 6, 7, or 8 of us getting together um, every, say, 3, 4 months, and doing this work on each other. It's been beautiful. It's been powerful.
I love that. This is how MDMA started for me as well. It was like 3 girlfriends, and we would just get together on the regular, maybe it was like quarterly or something like that, and we started doing this together. And
Hmm.
that was actually what really launched me in to become a psychedelic facilitator, because
Yeah.
I enjoyed that experience. I enjoyed processing each other. I enjoyed what we were doing. And then that was the foothold that kind of got me into, further down in this direction and doing this work.
Yeah. Because it's very apparent when you're doing that, the power of it and how incredibly healing it is.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that
And so
integrate.
I'm curious about when you were talking earlier, you were saying you don't eat 3 hours ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so at what point in the journey would you have a meal?
So you'll have a meal. People are hungry usually around 6 to 7 hours after the dropping point.
Okay. Okay.
So
So
it's
you
almost
take the
like a
first dose, it's 60 to 90 minutes. You take the second dose, and then 6 hours from the first dose is when you're kind of finished.
you're going to be in a little bit of, you're going to be in the afterglow, but your appetite might start to kind of come on board then, because no, because MDMA really does kind of quiet the appetite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I've found about MDMA is that my thoughts are very clear.
I know, that's the norepinephrine. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
alertness and the clarity comes from the norepinephrine, which is, you're like, oh, there it is. Like, there is what I'm shifting. I love that clarity about the MDMA.
Yes. Yes. Like I could function, I wouldn't drive or anything like that crazy.
Yeah.
But I 100% could carry on a conversation, could function in the world, can
Yeah.
navigate. I'm thinking very clearly. I'm not, my thoughts are not distorted in any way. My visuals aren't distorted in any way.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's really why I love it. I love the clarity that happens in the journey when you're communicating and you're talking to people. Like, so much juicy processing happens in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any like last words of wisdom around MDMA? And I'd love for you to share how people can connect with you and find you and work with you.
Thank you. So I just want to share, it's just been one of my favorite substances to work. I love the capacity to drop into our hearts and how powerful that is. And I just want to share, it's just a really beautiful, powerful psychedelic and can be very helpful in healing and in personal growth. I do host MDMA sessions online, and I host retreats and privates. My website is welldosedwellness.com. And there we've got, consultations. So you can jump on a discovery call and we can touch base and see, if this is the right next step for you to do. So you can find
Yeah.
me there and we can get in touch. I'd love to reach out to more people
Yeah.
and share this
Yeah.
amazing medicine.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this. And thank you for our last podcast about microdosing. Both of them have been amazing. And I've really enjoyed our conversations and
Me
getting
too.
to meet you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been really lovely. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Connected Community Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe. I can be found at www.nickyyoga.com, NICKYYYOGA.com. Until I see you again next week, I hope you have a beautiful day.